Well, you might say we're being tested. Our kids are taking an actual test. We call it the MAP test, and those results are in. And at first glance, they're great for some, but not certainly for every district and not for every child within the best districts. And how are we doing on our test? The one that says how we educate all of our kids could determine a lot about the future of our region. Tonight, the results are in, so what do they mean for all of us? Stay tuned.
Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the 9 network of public media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned. State leaders want Missouri to be one of the top 10 states in educational achievement by the year 2020. But right now, progress is hard to measure. Changes in the Missouri MAP test this year cloud comparisons to previous years, and with more changes to the test coming, progress over the next few years will likely be difficult to track. But even though year-to-year comparisons are inexact, they still show large gaps in the education children receive. Certain districts consistently perform significantly higher than the state average, as others fall well short of that benchmark. For instance, the recently created Normandy Schools Collaborative. There, less than 25% of students scored at the proficient level in any of the 4 subjects tested. And even in districts where averages were high, large gaps still exist between different groups of students, particularly when you look at poverty. So how can we be in the top 10 by 2020? School is back in session, and tonight we review the report card on last year and discuss the best way to educate our children going forward.
Okay, welcome to the show, into the studio. Margie Van Dieven, the Commissioner of DESE, Department of Elementary Secondary Education. Thanks for coming back to the show. I think it's important that we first wrap our heads around the Missouri Assessment Program, the MAP test, because that can measure, we hope, I guess, how our kids are doing or how they're not doing in school, and it also may determine the destiny of some school districts here in the St. Louis region. So first, help us out. The MAP test is different. It's changed this year. How is it different, and what does that mean?
So the test that was administered in the spring of 2015 was aligned to the new revised Missouri Learning Standards, and it was a part, at that time, Missouri was a part of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, so we had made our transition from the prior standards to the new standards.
Are these better standards? Are these higher standards?
They are higher standards. They're more rigorous in some areas. We looked at, in some areas they weren't significantly different, but they are designed to help students think more critically. You hear a lot more about the technical reading level, text complexity, and the math really is the area where we saw more significant shifts in the level of rigor for our students.
Before we talk about the level of rigor, is this, just to be clear, is this what we call Common Core in Missouri?
They are currently the Common Core state standards, and as you may or may not know, those standards are currently under review due to legislation that was passed 2 sessions ago. We have work groups that are in place right now. They'll be bringing recommendations to the State Board of Education in October.
So the test might not look the same next year or the year after that, perhaps?
That's correct. The General Assembly also requested that we not be a part of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, and they funded the ability to administer a test this spring. It will be aligned to the current standards, but we will not be a part of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. So the format will look similar, but the items will be different. And then the following year, we'll look at the tests that will be aligned to the standards that are brought forward and approved by the State Board sometime this upcoming school year.
So Smarter Balance, Common Core, those things, that's a whole conversation we could have, and I have no doubt that we will have as we go forward with this. But let's kind of compartmentalize that for just 1 second and tell me, you said the rigor was different. So is the test harder? What does it mean?
The test is harder. I think one of the, I think one of the things that we really want to talk about is that you cannot compare. So let's just start over. You can't compare what we were doing in the past with the new test. They're a brand new baseline set of data for us. They're different. One big thing that I really would like to mention is that for the first time our grade 3 through 8 were tested online, so all children had the ability and the access to test online. That was a significant feat for the state of Missouri, that they were able to pull that off without any major flaws, and so we're very proud of the state for being able to do that. Children were tested under using their 21st century learning skills, and we're able to do that. One of the areas that we did see, again, we talked a little bit about text complexity, so that has changed in the way that the tests were presented. They're designed to measure more things like listening and speaking skills, and asking children to not simply select their multiple choice questions, but really apply and support their answers and their rationale as to why they made the selection that they did. So really trying to move beyond simple black and white yes or no answers, and focusing on critical thinking.
So I gather it's hard to decide what these scores tell us, given that they can't, like you just said, you can't compare them
Correct.
to last
That's
year.
right. That's right.
So no decision, for instance, on any particular district's accreditation will be determined on these scores.
That's right. And again, that's in statute right now, that when we make a change in a test, that they will not be used to lower a district's classification or a teacher's evaluation.
I said we set that Common Core, or that the other, whatever it is we choose to call it here in Missouri, into another pile. But let's choose from that pile just a little bit and say, can we take these scores, while we can't compare them year to year to our own test, how do we compare, are we able to compare to other states, to other parts of the country?
So we will be able to do that, but most of the states have not released their scores yet. We're looking towards October, when we believe we'll have a full scale of the 17 states who administer the Smarter Balanced, and we'll be able to see where we compared on this first administration. Again, you want to be careful in any time that you're talking about 1 year of data, how much you pull out of 1 year of data, but it will give us an interesting perspective on how we look as a state in comparison to these 17 other states. The other thing that we were able to look at the field test data that was the national, the set of the 17 states who tested on that field test data, and we beat those projections pretty significantly, so we felt good about that. Again, it's field test data, and you need to be very careful about any kind of conclusion that you would make based upon measuring and comparing field test versus actual live data. Okay,
so if we can, we're getting to a point where we can compare within districts, within the state, within across state borders. We want to be top 10 by 2020. What does that mean? How do we do it?
So currently, great question. Currently what we're doing is we're looking at scores, tests that we do have on a national level, such as the ACT or the NAEP. We were planning to use the Smarter Balanced assessment. Right now we are designing Missouri tests, so whether or not we'll be able to do state-to-state comparability remains a question. That is certainly a priority for many, and so we're looking at, are there ways to do that in a manageable way or not? But the real focus right now is how do we respect the rights of the state of Missouri and ensure that we're able to put a test together that works the best for our kids.
We've heard this on the show before. We've heard this this week when we had our Twitter chat on Tuesday, that tests don't measure intelligence necessarily. Tests don't show improvement or progress necessarily. Are we testing the right thing? Can you test? Can you measure those things with the tests that you have now?
You know, and the tests do continue to get better. They're never going to be the perfect answer. What we're trying to ensure is that, you know, our kids' reading, do they have the basic numeracy skills necessary to enter into the workforce ready to be successful? We look at science, and we're measuring social studies because so many said we've got to focus on developing the whole child. So are they the perfect solution, and will they answer every question? No. Do they answer some? And I think that's what we always need to keep in perspective, is what is the purpose of the test? How are we using it? And is it in a responsible way that we're using the results of those tests and data points? But I can tell you that as commissioner, I get asked the question all the time. Are our kids, how do we know that our kids are prepared? How do we know that programs or funding or tax dollars are being used wisely? And the thing they point to are, you know, what do third grade reading scores look like? Or what is our algebra, how are our Algebra 1 scores panning out? And they ask about those real solid data points. So they have a purpose, but they are certainly not the only answer.
Commissioner Van Dieven, thank you for being here. Hang tight 1 second. We're going to join the rest of the group at the table. But first, this is a conversation that is always informed by you, as we just mentioned, on Twitter on Tuesday nights. Here's a little bit of what we learned from you this week.
On Tuesday night's Stay Tuned Twitter chat, the tweeters discussed the importance of success for all students, what achievement should mean, and addressing the whole child. Educators, parents, and concerned St. Louisans tweeted with us Tuesday and covered a lot of ground on this critical matter. Working towards the success of all students takes work, and the chat participants had ideas on how to get the work done. Carissa Anderson said, "Not only is it feasible, it's critical. We must work towards success for all children, can't just focus on a chosen few. For all kids to succeed, it will take the input of young people and the real work from adults charged with ensuring their success." Alex Cuenca said, "Redefine achievement. Currently, it fails to acknowledge what funds of knowledge student brings with them to the classroom." The Scholarship Foundation also chimed in, "Test scores correlate with income. Wealth does not create intelligence, but it does control measurement." Want to be a part of our next chat? Follow us on Twitter at StayTunedSTL and join the conversation on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. with the hashtag StayTunedSTL.
So we're going to keep this conversation going with educators who are already talking, so they've got a lot to say. I want to get right to it. Margie Van Dieven is still with us. Also with us, Ed Johnson, principal of Brentwood High School. Ed, thanks for being here. And the Teacher of the Year for 2012-2013 out of Afton. That's right. That deserves applause. English teacher, correct? Kathy Cartier from Afton High School. And welcome back to the program, Barrett Taylor, now assistant principal, Compton Drew Middle School.
Correct.
Barrett, what do these tests mean to you as an educator? What do these results mean to you? What do you make of all this?
I think it's a measure of what we're doing and what we need to work on. I respect the test. At the same time, I think that there are other things that tests don't measure, but I think they are important.
Teachers teaching to the test, you hear that a lot. The test, what do you make of them? Are they important to the educators on the ground?
Well, I'd have to say that, you know, when you decide to go into a teaching career, you don't say, hey, I think I could get that state assessment up another %. You know, you basically go into teaching because you love your subject. And that's why I went into teaching. I love literature, I love the craft of writing, and so I go in hoping that my kids will love the craft of writing and that I can help them be successful. But the test is an important benchmark for parents. Assessments need to improve teaching and learning. So hopefully that MAP test is improving teaching and learning and is helpful to the students as well, because assessment should be for students first of all. So I do think it's important. I think we're always going to have to be accountable. Accountability is inevitable because we have a lot of stakeholders, but I don't think teachers love high stakes tests.
As you're chomping at the bit there, don't let me interrupt you, but we have the scores right here. Brentwood is doing some amazing things.
Right.
Is what you're doing in Brentwood, is that something that we should just be replicating in Normandy? Would it work in other schools?
So I'm from a smaller school district, so I don't know if you can necessarily replicate it, but the focus is college and career readiness, okay? And so we work from that thought in everything we do. So it's standards that we know that are important, okay? Both academic, but there's also standards, you know, like 21st century skills that we also value and we think are important. So it's a meshing of a lot of different skills and standards that we think put together the whole student that is hopefully ready for a post-secondary pursuit of a really nice career. But teachers for us, I gotta put a plug in for my teachers. If it's about what we're doing, their work, all of our teachers care, and we have a focus to commitment to every single last kid in the building. And so we know our kids intimately, and we know that everything's about relationships. So quality contact with your students is absolutely essential, and our teachers are just amazing at that.
You mentioned every student, and Margie, I'd like to get your thoughts on this too. Brentwood is doing a better job than a lot of schools at this, but when you break down the scores and you look at the students who are receiving free and reduced lunch and how they perform compared to their peers, even in school districts that are doing really well overall, the scores are always lower for our students on the free and reduced lunch plan if you want to separate out the numbers that way. Why is that? And what can we do about it?
Well, we want to try to leverage whatever it is that presents those kids with difficulty. And so what's important is that you not only know your kids from a data perspective, but you also know your kids as human beings. And you got to get inside of them and figure out what makes them tick. And so there's certain things that you can do through the process of building a relationship with kids to encourage and empower them to overcome whatever it is that's serving as an obstacle or a barrier so that they can access learning better. So it's about being able to leverage certain things that are unfortunate things that kids are dealt with.
You know, as Barrett said, the test doesn't measure everything. So I have a number of kids maybe who are would be considered free and reduced lunch. We have probably about 43% in the Afton School District, but they make great strides that maybe aren't as obvious when we look at test scores. And so you have to consider where they began. And I would have to say that we have some fabulous teachers too, and we collaborate by looking at those standards. I think the rigorous standards, we're all glad to have more rigorous standards. And we look at those standards. We may not like the high stakes test, or we may not think it's the most authentic test, or we may think a lot of things about the test. But the standards are good, and we take them and we break them down and we say, what does this mean? And now what will be evidence that our kids have learned this? And how can we work together to figure out the best instruction to get them there? And you know, that big word differentiation, you know, we have to customize learning for kids, and everybody's going to have different progress. So what that looks like for you on that paper, I see faces, you're seeing numbers, and those kids are still making progress as well.
But does the test measure that, or can the test measure that progress? From the time they walk in the door in the beginning of school until the time they leave that year, even if they're not at above state averages, but they've still gone a long way.
I think that maybe my student came in and was below basic, but when they left, they were in the basic category, so there was progress there. And they need, you know, everybody learns at a different pace as well. And so I think that in many ways, some of the vertical alignment that we're doing with our other buildings, the middle school, for instance, for me, are helping us to see how we can, you know, help kids learn and scaffold and intervene when there's some needs there that are showing a deficit.
I could add on that too, that sometimes what you see in the general public with looking at just the proficiency rates, you might not be able to see that growth of the individual child, but the department does calculate a growth measure for each child, which is converted. It looks at the scale score, it looks at prior test scores, and they're able to calculate whether or not that child met or exceeded the growth trajectory for the individual child. So we do look at that. Okay. That's a component that's included in the MSIP-5 APR calculation, but we continue to focus, you know, it's just easier for the general public to understand proficiency rates. So the general public might not see that, but we're very cognizant of the need to look at every child and where they are on that growth trajectory.
And I want to point out, we have some really great proficiency rates. Like you said, the numbers are easy to understand. You got Kirkwood here at 89% and then some of the students. Brentwood, 87% proficient. Clayton, Ladue, Webster Groves, Lindbergh, 84. These are kind of the usual suspects here. But I think obviously the elephant in the room is that it's not that way for everyone. You've got 75% is the number in Normandy, and it's not on the positive side. It's 75% and then some are not proficient. You know, we're looking in the 20s, even in the 12s on some areas.
So I guess I'd like to respond to that by saying our first goal of the Top 10 by 20 plan is that all Missouri children will graduate college and career ready. And as so I'm going to play the new card, the new commissioner for a while, I've said that's probably the biggest challenge that we have in this state is if we mean all, we're going to have to do some things very differently, because we do say demographics do not determine destiny, and then we look at the data. We know our data. We know what our data have said for decades, and the people I meet with and speak with, they're frustrated and tired of talking about how we're going to solve it. So we look back. I've been spending a lot of time talking about or looking into this, and we kind of fall on the art and the science. So as you're talking about, as teachers or educators, we talk about the art and science of teaching. It's very telling when you look at the scientific evidence behind brain development and how the impacts of poverty and trauma on the child and their development. That's one part of it. Then you look at the art of that, and you talk about the climate and the culture that you were addressing, and how do we meet these needs and find kids where they are with holding that high expectation that we need to take them where they need to be successful. And so we cannot do that alone. The educators can't do it alone. This is going to take a mind shift and bringing community together to talk about how do we ensure that we're meeting these kids' needs so that they can come to school ready to learn and ready to be successful.
And do you think parents care if their kids are in a good district? Is there anything, what's in it for the parents in the good district? What do you tell your Brentwood parents if their kids are doing fine? Why should they care if Normandy is accredited or not? I
think a lot of it's modeling. You know, I have great partnership relationships with friends, colleagues in the Normandy and Riverview School District. And they know my passion is to always support to the best that I can, because, you know, in education, it's not just about serving your school. It's also about building a professional network where we all together as one big, giant group can service all of the kids in the St. Louis area. So I think a lot of it is just me modeling the fact that, you know, we need to reach out and support these other school districts, and that's basically the way you go about doing it if you're me. I think parents trust our professional instincts in our district, and so they trust that we know the right things to do, and they kind of follow our advice on things. So I think just to model certain things is a lot easier than to try to explain why we need to go in and support certain school districts.
Jeffrey Canada, founder of Harlem Children's Home, has this TED Talk, and he leads off where he talks about 50 years ago when I went to school, there were schools that were struggling. Today, those same schools are struggling. And so my whole argument is we have to think differently. So you talked about Riverview, Normandy. We're going to have to do something different in those school districts to support them and help those kids get to where they need to be if we're talking about 21st century skills. And I think the hard question is, what is it?
That's it.
Some of you, we talked a little bit before the show. Some of us have listened to it all. Some of us have not had the chance. But it was going around on social media and other places. The This American Life piece. It's an NPR, aired here on St. Louis Public Radio. 2 parts. One week they focused on Normandy. I think their take on things was that integration is a large key. It's something we tried in this country and kind of gave up on. It was too hard, maybe. I don't know. Any thoughts? Yeah. Kathy, did you hear the program? What did you think when you heard it?
I did hear the program, and it was a powerful story about a young girl who her education was very important to her. It was very important to her parent, so they did what they had to do in order to make sure that she got the best education possible, and it meant having to take a bus 40 minutes to school and then face she knew not what, because she was going to be potentially an outsider, and she had already heard and been to a meeting where some parents were not especially friendly, and so if we're wondering if parents are interested, they definitely are interested in their kids being in the place where they'll get the best education. And I think we said earlier that if the schools are going to be integrated, then maybe our communities are going to have to be a little bit more integrated, and we're going to have a complete change of mind in our city.
It's a paradigm shift. I think it's difficult. I don't think that we want to do that. I mean, all the research shows that kids learn best in schools that are diverse by socioeconomic status and race. But we've not done it yet.
What happened to the test scores in Francis Howe when they took Normandy transfer students?
Yeah, the test scores were unchanged across if you look at them in the aggregate, the test scores were not changed. Now, what we haven't been able to do yet is to look at the individual students and see what type of impact changing that environment had on the individual child's score. We haven't been able to really, that takes significant research to make a claim one way or the other that it had significant impact or not. That is certainly a study we're interested in conducting. Does it make a difference, and how do we know?
Do you think integration is a key component that we should be talking about and kind of addressing that head on in education?
I think it certainly has a place, but I think I want to go back to Kathy's point about integration of communities as well, because I heard the story as well. The part that I was concerned that they didn't mention is how strong the desire was for the people in the Normandy school districts who came to the state board on a number of occasions saying, you know, we want to keep schools in our community. Community schools are really important to us, and so you know, it's unfortunate to think that to get a quality education, some students feel they need to get on a bus to go elsewhere. How can we get the system working so that kids have quality schools in their communities?
There are about 30 seconds left.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if you want to know why kids in our school district do well, for the most part, it's because we're a great community school that receives a lot of support from our community. And so kids are comfortable because they know they have support from the community, and that can really provide you with such a great atmosphere that puts everyone in such a great comfort level that it just makes things easy. But, you know, it's unfortunate because we have to see some of our kids from Normandy and Riverview catching the bus in off the Metrolink, and these kids started out at 5:30 in the morning, and so, you know, they'll have a 13, 14-hour day if they've got extracurricular activities going, and for some reason when these kids land in the classroom, we expect them to be on the same playing field as the kids who walk 3 to 5 minutes from home to school. And so when you talk about integration, I mean, it's real easy to throw that out there, but you need to understand for certain kids, it's a real serious hardship being imposed on certain kids just to receive a quality education, and that's unfair.
Margie, Ed, Kathy, Barrett, thank you all for your time. Thank you for joining us. You can always join us with hashtag StayTunedSTL. Until next time, stay tuned.